Thank you so very much for attending today's event. It was truly amazing turnout. As you can tell, we had to open up here. We have 95 clients and 45 guests. Wow. Now, I think I've come around and poured probably more wine than when I was a keg waiter. However, I think I introduced myself to almost everyone. If I didn't, my name is Ken Gordon. I'm a senior wealth advisor at Verus Financial under the umbrella of National Bank Financial. So on behalf of Verus, on behalf of National Bank, thank you so very much for attending. I'm excited about today's event. I hope you are, because we have Dr. Tom Deans in the house with us today. I had the pleasure of hearing Tom speak about a year and a half ago at a national convention. And after I heard him speak, his talk resonated with me so much that I said, I need to put him in front of you. And that was a big thing for me to do, but I was confident in putting Tom in front of you because it's been 23 years since I've ever put anybody else in front of you. We've been doing this for over 30 years. And 23 years ago, there was a man, and you will remember this, just, we're all getting a little older and just taxing your memories. I put a man in front of you, Mr. and Mrs. Currit, you'll remember. His name was Dunnery Best. And he was from Midland Walwyn. Remember good old blue chip thinking? Okay? And then we got bought out by Merrill Lynch. But Dunnery Best stood in this room in 2000, and he said something really profound. And you were all paying attention. The reason why you were paying attention is you had this very unorthodox company that you owned named Nortel. And none of you bought Nortel. It was just given to you for free. It was a spin-off. Remember now, it's all coming back? Vaguely coming back. Well, when he was in this room, it was $124 a share, and none of you wanted to sell it for two reasons. Number one, your adjusted cost base was zero, and you didn't want to pay the tax man, cha-ching. And Mr. Best told you, hang on, it's going to $200 a share. 9 years later, it was at 39 cents. Hence why I have been doing all the speaking over the last 23 years. Tom Dean's message is going to resonate with you. We at Verus Financial have 97 affluent families. And we call those families families because we're a family-run practice, and we take care of our family members just like we take care of our own. Tom's book is all about how to help family businesses. His book, Willing Wisdom, which he's going to speak to today, it's about learning to have open conversations with your family. Open the dialogue. Discuss what's going to happen when you pass away, and what is the most effective way and efficient way to transfer assets from one generation to the next. But it's not all about money. As Tom will allude to, it's about wisdom. It's about passing the wisdom from one generation to the next so that you can continue the family legacy for generations to come. How'd I do, Tom?
Keep going.
Okay, Tom has he's got a flight he's got to get, and he needs to leave here by 3 o'clock. I have 8 PowerPoint slides I want to make, but quickly, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Heritage Trust, which is the largest independent trust company in British Columbia. Nicole couldn't be here, but if Stacy is here, trust me, Stacy, I cannot forget your name. I know you're a senior vice president and you're a vice president and senior trust officer. You will be on the panel. Thank you so much, and thank you for your sponsorship. Clark Wilson, right here. Thank you for your sponsorship. We have Michael Scott right here. This is my go-to guy. You need to change your will, you go to this guy. You having a problem settling estate, you go to him. Okay? Why? Because he's incredibly knowledgeable, and most importantly, what I like, he's incredibly efficient. I'd also like to thank Chantel. She has the word family. She's a family lawyer. Family. But she really focuses on the collaborative side of family law. And any of you that may have been through a divorce, that's not a pleasant situation to have. Trust me, I know. So I'm so passionate about divorce because I didn't know anything about it that I became a certified divorce financial analyst. Go figure. Nobody in Canada has ever heard about it before, but it's very popular in the United States. I am sure nobody in this room is getting divorced. You've been together for 100 years. Why stop now? However, I'm sure somebody knows somebody that perhaps is going to be getting divorced or contemplating divorce. This is where you dial in Chantel and myself for help. Thank you, National Bank Financial, right here. Regional Manager Ben, his partner Minette, thank you for your unwavering support. Kathy Kushner, thank you so very much. And Manager, our estate planner from National Bank, she will be on our panel as well. I know it was fast, but how was the food today? Okay. More importantly, how was the wine? Okay, well, I'd like to thank Little Engine for their sponsorship. It's a great winery. Nicole and Stephen French own the winery. I go there all the time. Scott Robinson is an amazing winemaker. I think he's one of the best winemakers in the Okanagan Valley. And then we're very fortunate today to have Deanna Carloni, who is the brand and wine club manager. I'd like to thank them for their wine sponsorship. After the event, don't worry, there's going to be wine tasting, book signing, desserts for those that didn't get desserts, and what better way to have a wine tasting with chocolate dessert. Okay? So for every negative, there is a positive. Very important. This could not happen if it wasn't for my team. Cody, Carmen, stand up. My 3 children and Carmen, who might as well be my 4th. They dotted every single I and crossed every T. Carmen got married about a year ago, and she said, this is like planning another wedding. It's really funny when I go around the room and I hear people say things to me, and like, they said, I won't say what client it was. They said, the Verus group in your family remind me of the series Succession. I did not say anything. Like, then as I was pouring wine, I started to think, I said, Roman is the worst nutty character ever. Chase is a great guy. There's no similarity there. Sarva with Montana, no similarity there. Kendall and maybe Cody, maybe a little bit. Cody's not going to try to control the business yet. He knows he's going to get it. So I'm going to take a bullet for the team. If there's any similarity to anyone on the show, who do you think it would be? Mr. Roy. Oh, yes. You know why? There's not a lot of similarities between me and him, but there are a few. So thank you for the client that said we were like Succession. Okay, I've got 8 slides. I'm going to get through them as quickly as I can. I think it's important at this juncture to give you an idea what's going on in the markets, because there is an incredible amount of noise in the marketplace today, and you are getting bombarded with it, completely bombarded. And it's all negative news. Misery demands company. And if you're watching CNBC, my advice is don't. And if you haven't watched CNBC, good for you. And if you don't believe me, believe the wise words of Warren Buffett, who has repeatedly said, have you ever met an extremely wealthy economist? You haven't, because they're always wrong. So, we ended last year, the S&P 500 in 2022 went down exactly 19.33%. The NASDAQ dropped over 33%. And the S&P finished at the year end at 38.37. Okay? So, what happens in the beginning of this year? Well, at the beginning of the year, Morgan Stanley did a survey of the so-called guru experts on Wall Street, and for 2023, 13% of respondents said that they thought the S&P was going to fall to below 3,500 from its then level of 38.37. A whopping 54% said it's going to be around 3,500. Let's just do simple math. That's 67%. Let's just call it 70% of the so-called experts were calling for the market to fall even further after it got hammered in 2022. How badly did it get hammered? Well, if you had a balanced portfolio of 60% equities, 40% bonds, it was down 17% last year. It was worth the worst performance in over 100 years. Okay? So if we fast forward to just last month, basically 50% of all of the people, the so-called experts on Wall Street, are bearish. They're singing the same regurgitated message over and over and over. This is how it goes. The Feds were late to the party. They're going to over-tighten. They are going to put us into a deep recession. That recession is going to be a profit recession. And corporate profits are going to fall anywhere from 10% to 15%. And in some cases, profits are going to fall 20%. And what are we telling you folks to do? We want you to sell. Remember the saying, sell in May and go away? Now they're saying, sell in May, before May, and go away. At Verus Financial, Cody and I are substantially more optimistic. And I'm going to show you why we're optimistic. I want you to work with me, because in my 40 years of managing money, there have been times in my career where I thought it's been very difficult to forecast what's going to happen. And there's times when it's quite easy. As much as the noise is out there today, I want to show you why I think it's easier to forecast. If you take a look at all the bears don't want to talk about the first quarter. Okay, they say, well, no, that was fluke. Okay? But if we update that slide for you, the Dow's up about 2.5% so far year to date. S&P's up slightly over 8. NASDAQ's right in around there, 16. Russell's right there in around 2.34. And the S&P TXS has jumped another 3% to 6.69%. The reality here is those so-called experts got it deadly wrong. Because why? They were too bearish. Let me explain to you how bad their forecasting really is. In late 2001, in October and November, clients in the room, what were Cody and I doing? Let me help you out. There was a sense of euphoria. There was the meme stocks. Everyone thought that Jeremy Powell would never take the punch bowl away, that inflation would stay low, interest rates would stay low, and they said the longest bull market in history has a lot of legs left to go. And what were we doing? Stephen Wong, help me out. You're this bright guy in the room. At Verus Financial, we were taking risk off the table when everybody's plowing money back into the market, and we raised 30 to 40% fixed income in all of your portfolios. So when 2002 hit and the balanced portfolio had the worst performance in 100 years, everyone in this room did substantially better. But if you listen to the Goldman Sachs of the world in the beginning of 2022, they had a prediction that the S&P 500 would finish at 5,100. 5,100. It finished at 3778, okay? They only missed the mark by 25%. And they pay these people way too much money to give you the wrong advice. Even Morgan Stanley, that was incredibly bearish and still are bearish, said that the market in 2022 would end at 4,100, and they only missed the mark by approximately 15%. Here's the thing that you need to know. From 2002 to 2020, a 20-year span, Wall Street has got their targets for the industry wrong by 10% every year annualized for the last 20 years. That's why you need to turn off CNBC, right? Come to the lunches, have some fun, drink some wine. It's a whole lot easier. So you take a look. Why are we confident? Why are we more optimistic? What we know is that stock markets always go back to their previous peak and beyond. Always. It's just the time it takes. On average, in the last 50 years, it takes 19 months on average for a market to go back to its peak. Are there extremes? Absolutely. What's the best extreme I could give you? COVID. After COVID, the market reached its peak in 141 days, or exactly 4.7 months. If you want to look at the NASDAQ, you could say, okay, well, yeah, on the tech bubble, hey, in 2000, it took 13 years to recover. But if you look at this chart, and if the average is 19 months, you can't manage money by looking in the rear view mirror. However, if we just take the average of 19 months, and the peak was in January of 2022 at 4,797, that chart was done on March 24th, when the S&P 500 was at 3971. We're about slightly over 4,100 today. But the reality is we know the stock market's going back from the peak. So if the peak was in January and the average is 19 months, when would we hit the peak? No. It is spring of, say, I heard the right answer. July. July of when? 2023. Okay, because the peak was in 2022. Okay? God, it's a good job I'm doing the math for you. Christ, no wonder we manage your money. Whew. So what we know, the 1 year out, if it goes back to that, I can't guarantee you that. Nobody can. But if the market does this, it's a rate of return of 22.6%. Maybe it make 2 years. But in 2 years' time, would you all be happy with an 11.7% annualized rate of return? Sounds pretty good to me. We get that at Pace for Lunch. The market is eventually going to go there, and the bearish people have forgotten. They've also forgotten that it's the third year of the presidential cycle, which is always the best out of the 4-year cycle. Why? I think you've had too much wine. Nobody wants to work with me today. Re-election. Thanks. You came to the lunch and I said you needed to come. Yeah. Biden wants to get reelected. He's got some problems. He's got some big problems. His approval rate went in March from 42 down to 39. Now he's like Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, Mr. Truman. Hey, he's got some problems. But one of his problems he doesn't have is he has full employment. We have some of the lowest unemployment rates in history on both sides of the border. How do you have a deep, meaningful recession that the bears are calling for if you have full employment? I don't get it. So what is Mr. Biden's number one worry today? And it's not Russia, and it's not China, so tell me what it is. What does he need to do?
Get reelected.
No. How's he going to get reelected? What's the number one thing you vote for in a president? You vote if the economy is strong. Americans don't want to feel it in their pocketbook. So why are Americans and Canadians feeling it in their pocketbooks? Okay, this is like charades just trying to get you going. Bingo, you got the right answer. Congratulations. Inflation. And inflation needs to come under control. Didn't you love the words, oh, don't worry, inflation is only transitory? There's 3 overused words in the business English language, and that is transitory, pivot, and the new one, which I can't stand, is sticky. Don't worry, inflation is only transitory. It'll all take care of itself. Every single person that said that was dead wrong. Everybody says, when are they going to pivot? I don't know for sure. But I can tell you one thing, inflation isn't as sticky as you think it is. Here's my favorite chart in the presentation. If you go back to June of last year, inflation peaked at 9.1%. 9.1. 3 data points do not make a trend. But the CPI number in March was 5% year over year, and that's 9 consecutive months of lower inflation. Let's look under the hood for a moment on the CPI. The bottom blue line is the shelter index. That's how much it costs to rent your house, and that makes up 35% of CPI. A whopping 35%. If you break down that 35%, 1/3 of that is actually people that rent. So you get a pretty good gauge on what the rental market is charging and what the inflationary effect is. 2/3, a whopping 2/3, is very subjective. It's like me going to Chantel and saying, Chantel, if you were going to rent out your house, what do you think it would rent for? Now, if I asked every one of you that question, what is your primary residence do you feel in your own mind you could rent out your house for? What kind of number do you think you're going to give me?
Inflated.
So inflated. Pie in the sky because your house is fantastic. It's worth more than you ever thought. You're going to give me an inflated number. And that's why this is in a CPI is in some shape or form, when you look under the hood, there's some certain flaws. So the reality is, if you look at the shallow observed rent index, which measures the changes in rent over time, what is the real world telling where the rental market is going? It's the red line.
Downward.
It's going south. And if that happens and it's the major component of CPI, where do you think CPI is going to go?
Downwards.
God, Mark, I love you. He's not even a client yet. I don't know why. So, if inflation is going down, folks, what's going to happen to interest rates? You've had way too much wine. When inflation goes down, where are interest rates going to go? Down. Absolutely. Does it take a rocket scientist too much to figure that out? So when interest rates go down, that's amazing for bonds. Inverse relationship. As interest rates go down, bond prices go up. You got to love that. As interest rates go down, corporations can borrow more money cheaper for plant, equipment, technology, and that's great for the stock market. So, I feel really comfortable saying to you the Bank of Canada is probably done. Inflation was announced on Tuesday at 4.3%. The target rate on both sides of the border is 2%. And I think you may even see perhaps a slight decrease in interest rates in Canada this year. In the States, the next Fed meeting is on May 3rd. The chances of a 25% rate hike are probably pretty good. But if banks are starting to scrutinize their loans and they're keeping the purse strings a little tighter, that's obviously going to have a contraction phase on inflation as well. So, if you believe inflation is going to come down, interest rates are going to come down, and you got to be more optimistic about the bond market and the stock market. Well, you guys haven't made this mistake because you're with Verus Financial. You have not been overweight cash in 2023. In 2022, you were overweight cash in 2022. And Cody, who we nicknamed the Bear, well, he sits in his office for 10 to 12 hours a day. The door is closed, and he's staring at 3 screens. And what's he doing in October and November of last year? Trying to reallocate your asset allocation and get more money on the playing field and reducing cash. Reducing cash when people are increasing cash. The consensus view is always wrong. 95% of the time. So it's kind of funny that we've nicknamed Cody the Bear, and his office is called the Bear Cave. So every morning I phone Montana and Chase, and I say, "How's the bear?" They always say the same thing. He hasn't come out of his cave yet. I don't go to the office as much as I used to before, but I have learned not to call my son till the market closes at 1 o'clock. Because if I do, he answers the phone. "What's up? What do you need?" So the reality is if you look at this dramatic overweighting of cash to U.S. equities, and the timing of all this, experts have been terrible. And if you believe in inflation is coming down and interest rates are coming down, and you also happen to know that there was a record $5.25 trillion of money market mutual funds, which is like having your money in a savings account that is secure, earning anywhere from 4 to 5%. Now, there's 4 things that I've learned about managing money in 40 years. Number 1, go hard and fast against the consensus view. Number 2, stay true to your conviction. no matter how bad the noise gets. But I'm smart enough and bright enough to know and learn my lessons over the 40 years. Sometimes we make a mistake, but we'll stay committed to our conviction until it's proven otherwise. The third most important thing I learned is be proactive rather than reactive. Be proactive rather than reactive. And the most important thing I have ever learned in this 40 years is be ahead of the curve, not behind. So, I'm going to leave you. We're going to turn this over in a moment, but I want you to think about one thing on the way home besides everything that Tom says. Ask yourself one question. You believe me now, somewhat, that inflation is going down, interest rates are going down. What the million-dollar question is, where is the 5.25 trillion going when rates go down? Opportunity knocking. Some of that money is going to find its way into the market. Do you need to be behind the curve or ahead of the curve? Ahead of the curve. That's why we manage your money at Verus Financial. I'd like to just have Ben come up just here in a sec. I'll find him a mic. Ben has been great support. He's our regional manager. He's one of the number one reasons why we are at National Bank. The other major reason why we're at National Bank is, and you all should know this, is that National Bank is the only major bank in Canada that doesn't have one single proprietary product. It's not like RBC, it's not like Scotia, it's not like BMO, where you have all of these advisors pumping proprietary products. We got zero. We're at National Bank because National Bank lets us dictate how we manage your money. They allow us to go out and get the best third-party managers, the best in class, the best world-class managers. That's why we're at National. We've been here for coming up 4 years. I don't know why this young man has nicknamed me the dinosaur. But truly, he has nicknamed me the dinosaur. I can't figure it out, whether it's because I'm the oldest person in the office or whether it's the color of my hair or the fact that when I started in 1984, we didn't have computers. Everything, Ben. Actually, Ben, I did figure out the reason why you call me the dinosaur is because when I started in 1984, 85, I figure you were in grade 1 or 2.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Okay. This works perfect. Awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben West. I'm the regional manager at National Bank Financial. Usually when I'm asked to speak at these events, I'm the energy guy, right? Someone super boring has just presented and I'm like, all right, I come up here, I'm animated, tell a couple of stories, but we're at a 9, Ken, and I'm just going to dial it back to a 7. And also knowing that Tom Dean's an exceptional speaker, so I do want to transition over him pretty quickly. So I just want to tell a quick story. So as Ken indicated, I met Ken in 2018, 2019, and he came to me with a really simple concept. He's like, Ben, I want a better platform to service my clients. Thought to myself, okay, maybe I can provide a better platform for you to service your clients. So I thought to myself, hey, do you want to go on a date? And it's a metaphor. So you go on a date and you start learning about each other and what do you talk about? You talk about the things that are attractive about you. And so as Ken indicated, and I said, you know what, National Bank Financial will allow you some flexibility to build your business. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You obviously have conviction about what you do and how to build it. So how about I just support you? So we offered some flexibility with that. And I said, well, we also have a commitment to technology. And it's, there's various ages in the group here. So it's not that technology to isolate individuals, it's to bring technology to you. So technology to manage the money, and Cody does an exceptional job at that, as well as technology for you to engage with your investment advisor. National is particularly good at that. And the last thing is, if I'm going to make myself sound attractive, it's that we give a snap. And we're a really personal bank and feel. And that family concept that was introduced, we feel it here. So I understand, hey, we're a big bank and all that sort of stuff. But the local management, myself and Manette, we're BC-based individuals, and that's unusual for executives that kind of do what we do. And I'm not, I don't misunderstand my role. My role is to service Ken, who subsequently services you guys. And so you have a commitment from the management side to enable an investment advisor. I'm like, so like, do you find that attractive? And then Ken's response is, he's going to tell me what he thinks is attractive. And that's always pretty fun too. He's like, I am going to service my clients better than anyone you've ever seen. I'm like, awesome. I'm impressed and scared at the same time. And he's like, I've got the best team you've ever seen. And for those that have met his team, they are fabulous and personal, and they've absorbed the best qualities of Ken and deviated where they need to. Thank you guys for that out in the corner there. And he said, and I do more than manage money. I know Ken's discussion was about managing money in the markets and that kind of stuff, but he does try his best to deliver more than investment management. And he's invited our partners here, and our speaker is along those lines. And so it's a full service, family orientation of his business. And so I was like, all right, let's get married. And so he decided to come over. And so Ken's with National Bank, and like marriages, and Ken did reference his expertise in not being married, is that okay, how does a marriage look once you've started it? Because we started to work together in 2019. And so he said his team is one of the best that I've ever seen. And recently, if you weren't aware, Cody earned the Rising Star, the top young advisor in our entire firm recently. So congratulations, Cody. And then another award that we give out is Wealth Management Excellence. And it's what I just referenced, which is, beyond just the investments themselves, a comprehensive approach to bringing expertise to you, the clients. And recently, they also won Wealth Management Excellence for BC. So they're the top of the 170 that I have in BC on a management level. So congratulations again to the entire team. And then that transitions nicely. So for a team to earn that type of award, they have to show a commitment to wealth management and bring those experts into the room. And that's what we have today. So as Ken referenced, Tom Deans is an amazing speaker. He's got a PhD in intergenerational wealth transfer. And in my experience with him, he always leaves you with one or two items that you can take home and you can simple and understand. So Tom, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. All right, thanks very much. Thank you. And before I start, how about a big round of applause for Ken? Holy smokes. He told me he gave up coffee. I'm not buying it. Wow. This is a talk not about creating wealth. I don't pick stocks, unlike Dennery Best. I am not going to tell you how to manage your wealth. I am an author and I am a full-time speaker. I ran a large family business. For 8 years as CEO, I sold a family business, wrote a book about that experience, which turned into this really quite extraordinary and odd and unpredictable global speaking career. I've spoken in 27 countries, and I'm going to deliver the message that I've been sharing all around the world. It's a universal theme, so it's not technical. And I also like to make it very clear right out of the gate that I am not a consultant. So if you're starting to dig some of the things that I'm sharing about how families prepare heirs and transition wealth, if you want more, definitely do not call me, because that is not what I do. I truly speak, I do a lot of media work, I do a lot of writing. So I just try to start conversations between you and your other family members, between you and your advisors and other trusted advisors. That is what I do. So I want you to listen to me from that perspective. Everything that I'm selling has already been bought. It's my book. And Ken has bought a pile of them. Thank you, Ken. You're in my will. So let's get started. We are at an interesting moment in our country's history. The greatest generation of wealth creators, the baby boomers, are turning 75 this year. First of all, they're a very interesting cohort. They were born at a time just after the Second World War. They listened to stories from their parents and grandparents about the First World War, the Great Depression. They were a cautious crowd. I was born in 1962, so I'm at the tail end of it. I kind of straddle two cohorts, but I know that generation extremely well. They were the greatest generation of business owners. They started businesses in record numbers. They were careful, cautious, parsimonious, fabulous investors and savers, because they were always worried that there was some other crisis coming down the road. And they were largely right. But they're turning 75 this year. And they are transitioning, and they're dying. Sorry, that's the bad news. Sorry, they're dying. But they're actually not dying quite the same way that we've always died in this country. That's going to change. And there is a record amount of wealth that is transitioning. Today, in this country, a little over $250 million will be inherited by Canadians. That's 250 today, 250 tomorrow, and every day for the next 10 years. Roughly $1 trillion. That business, that boomer crowd also started businesses in record numbers, and they did what most business owners do, and I know I do it myself, my father did it, my great-grandfather and great-grandfather. Business owners have always, when they've been successful, created profits in their corporations and kept that money in their business. We just keep reinvesting it in that business. Why? Because we know that business. We kind of know the risks to that business. But those business owners are starting to age out, and those businesses are transitioning. And it's not going particularly well. And I don't want to turn this into a business transition talk, but I know there's a couple of business owners here. I've met a couple of you already, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes on this. There is another $1 trillion sitting in the equity and the retained earnings of these businesses with virtually no plan other than they are going to die and the business will transition to the children. What is shocking is that half of all business owners in Vancouver are missing the most important document in a business succession plan and an estate plan. What do you think that is? It's a will. You don't have a will? Well, the province of British Columbia has a nifty little formula waiting for you that's going to divide up your business along with your canoe and your barbecue. According to that formula, they don't care if you sit on the local hospital board or you're fabulously wealthy or successful or a nice person. That formula applies to everyone equally, and it's not going well. The courts are full of families in dispute. Sometimes there is a will. In many cases, those wills are outdated. And it's causing incredible friction inside families. So I'm not talking today about how to create more wealth. Ken's got you covered there. I'm talking about how can you protect the wealth that you've already created? How can you, if you think making money's hard, you should see how hard it is to transition wealth to the next generation and to grow it faster than the growth of your own progeny. It is really, really hard in this country to build dynastic wealth. That is, wealth that starts out typically with an operating company, and that family often struggles to make that leap to broadly diversified holding company where the family is not necessarily deriving income from one operating business, but from their investments. They scaled and protected their wealth by spreading their risk across a whole bunch of different currencies and asset classes, and that is what makes families super successful. Very few people talk about that. Why? Because to talk about that would be to talk about something that is the most obvious and predictable thing in life. What is that? Death. Well, can't say death. Holy smokes. I wish I had written a book on, I don't know, a motivational book on how to unlock the lion in you and be, This is a really hard subject, talking about aging and dying. Most people, they look away. They don't want to look at this. And it is causing incredible problems when it comes to money. There is something called family systems theory. It is an academic branch of the study of families as a system or as an organization. And the central tenet of family systems theory is that families largely repeat. We know from studies that kids that grow up with parents who smoke, there's a higher probability that those children will smoke. Children who grow up with one or two parents who are entrepreneurs have a higher propensity to be an entrepreneur. We know this. This is family systems theory. We also know that families, as they're contemplating their estate plan, look back into their own personal history for clues on how their own parents addressed estate plans. And guess what's there? Not much. We're talking about the first generation of serious wealth creators looking back in their own memories for ideas on how their parents approached wealth. And you know what? You know what the defining characteristic of their parents' estate plans were? I'll give you a hint. Silence. You don't talk about money. You wouldn't want to talk about something like wealth. It's just rude. It's just it's not Canadian-like. It's not what we do. In fact, if we take our entire life's work as represented by a personal net worth number and we wrap it in secrecy, then surely we'll have a successful family that takes that wealth and goes off and does tremendous things. Listen, inherited wealth will do one of two things. It will release potential in the next generation. It will fund the start of new businesses. It will fund healthcare and education and all sorts of creative things and philanthropy. Or it will accelerate demise. Inherited wealth won't equivocate. It will do one or the other. And families who are repeating the silence that has defined their parents' estate plans and bringing that same kind of secrecy and lack of transparency to their own plans are going to pay a really high price. If there's one idea in the book, Willing Wisdom, that Ken has purchased for all of you as a gift today, it's this. We have been led to believe that estate planning is really about answering the question, who gets my stuff when I'm dead? Shocker that 12.5 million Canadians don't have a will when it's been reduced to such a brutal, clinical notion like that. What I've tried to do in Willing Wisdom is actually unlock the self-interest in estate planning. Guess who the biggest beneficiary of my estate is? Moi. That's the bilingual component of my presentation today, by the way. It's me. Now, the lawyers in the room would be saying, well, actually, Tom, that's actually not technically possible. For in order you to be a beneficiary of your own will, you'd have to die, and then how do you access your assets after you're not here? So here's how I frame myself as the biggest beneficiary of my own estate plan. I have not only drafted a will in collaboration based on lots of conversation with my potential beneficiaries. I have shared those documents with those people. Those people happen to be my family, my children, my wife, and charities. I grew up in a family where we met annually. I'll be 61 next week. Ken, if you're looking for a gift idea, I'm a 16 in the neck. I'm just putting that out. I grew up in Montreal. We would go to the MAA. I don't know if anyone's from Montreal, but we'd go to Montreal and we'd go to the MAA. We'd have these annual family meetings with our advisors present, and God, they were boring. They were awful. Until one day, I was 5. I was around 8 or 9 when I really, really remembered what was going on. My grandfather's manufacturing facility in St. Remy, Quebec burnt down, and I remember these incredibly intense conversations about how or should they refinance and rebuild, and they did. And fast forward to 2011, and my brother and I inherited from my last surviving grandparent. And it was a relatively small percentage of that estate. Please remind me to come back and talk about the perils and the dangers of generation skipping. This is where parents look at their own kids and go, they're good. We're just going to hop over top of them and leave all of the wealth to our grandchildren. It's a big problem. Please remind me to come back to that. But I said, I inherited a very small percentage of that estate. And my brother recently at a dinner, he said, what did you do with that? What have you done with that inheritance? And I said, I actually haven't spent a dime. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem spending money. Not that money. It sits notionally in a separate bucket, in a separate account. The relationship that I have with that particular account, that wealth, is so different from the wealth that I earn from my speaking, from my book sales. It's completely different. The stories, the repetitiveness of the stories that were told that connected both my brother and I and other family members to that wealth framed a different relationship to it. That's a world apart from families who keep their family stories secret, don't share them, and don't share their estate plans, or view estate planning as something that's unseemly. It's a conversation about wealth, and if people know what they're going to get, then maybe I won't live so long. If there's one idea that I'm really, really proud about in Willing Wisdom, it's that I connect the idea of estate planning to late in life care. We are living longer in this country, vastly longer than any other generation. Some estimates put that the level of cognitive impairment of Canadians, 1 in 4 over the age of 65. It used to be that we would have heart attacks and die at 72, guys first, statistically. I mean, now guys we have heart attacks at 72. Now we get a stent, we go 20 years, we run 4 marathons. We're just not dying, which is not to say that we're living necessarily high-functioning lives. the nature of our exit has changed. And estate planning has revealed that, in fact, it's not necessarily just about death. There is a long chapter of retirement where if you read retirement books, you'll always see someone playing tennis or playing golf or sitting in a beautiful chair. There's a whole chapter of retirement where we're not swinging anything. We're lying down and we're in the care of someone. Who? Who's providing our care? Is it our accountant? Our lawyers? The pharmacist? Who? Who do we hope is going to step up and provide oversight of our care in that moment of need? And that moment of need may be a decade, by the way. Who? Our children, our family. The same people that we're keeping in the dark around the contents of our estate plans. Now tell me how Financial Secret's going to add to the quality and quantity of care. That's what I'm trying to flip in Willing Wisdom. By offering 7 questions in the book, questions that we've used in our own family meetings with our advisors' presence to start these conversations. 7 questions. The book is completely devoid of any answers. If you're looking for answers around what your estate plan looks like, the book is useless. Save 2 hours. Don't read it. But if you're looking for 7 questions that can really start fascinating conversations about the plan that is right for you, that answers the question, how much should I leave my children? How much is too much? How much should I leave to charity? How much is too much? One of the fastest growing areas of state litigation right now are, you ready for this? This is beautiful. It's children suing charities because the parents have quietly said, well, our kids are in pretty good shape. Let's leave 10 mil to the hospital foundation, to UBC, whatever. They just didn't happen to tell their kids. And so, of course, where do they discover this? Where are they discovering this? Guess what, folks? It's not at the reading of the will like in Hollywood movies, where everyone gathers in the lawyer's office and then they read that someone gets the business and someone didn't get the business and someone gets the cottage, someone didn't get the cottage, and then there's a gasp. right? That's, of course, the sound of litigation. No, it's not that. Do you know where ground zero for all the really great drama is in estate planning, where families haven't had family conversations and facilitated family meetings? I'll tell you where. I was speaking recently in Las Vegas at the American Funeral Directors Convention, and I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral and watched, funeral directors. They're always wearing dark suits, much like this, and they're very, they're looking very, very sad, very somber people. Yeah, well, I've been to their convention. These people are completely out of control. They are around death all day long. They are some of the most alive, fun, hilarious people. What you see. Anyway, I give this talk, and then I go and have dinner with the board of directors, and during dinner, they start sharing some of the stuff that they've seen go on in their funeral homes. And I am sitting there I could write 4 books, but I got to share one story that really underscores the message that I'm sharing today. They share a story about 3 sisters who show up at a funeral home. Dad has died a number of years ago. Now mom's died. And so the first question the funeral director asked is, do you have a copy of your mother's will? It's actually a legal requirement that they ask for that because the executor in the will will be the person with the legal authority to implement final wishes. So one sister goes, well, I don't have a copy of the will. Do you have a copy of the will? She goes, I don't have a copy. Do you have a copy? She doesn't have a copy. They say, look, we're just going to go back to mom's house. We'll be back in 10 minutes, and then we'll get this thing going. They go back to the house. It doesn't start to go particularly well because one sister's already been there and cleaned out the silverware. Not good. They get through that, and they go to the usual places they look for a will. You'd look in the safe. You'd look in the top drawer of the desk. They can't find it, so what do? What's the next thing they do? I'll tell you. They get the tools out. They go into the air vents. They start looking for this document. They start cutting up the walls, looking for the drawer. They start destroying this house, looking for a document that they've actually heard, they think exists. Heard some conversations about it, but no one has it. After destroying the house, they go back to the funeral home. Now it's a no will, no executor. Now it's a convention. Now it's going to be a committee that decides on how to celebrate mom's life. And so one sister says, well, mom really wanted to be buried beside dad. And the other one says, well, that's not what I heard. I heard cremation, and she loved both oceans. She wanted her remains to be divided in both oceans. And the other sister goes, well, I heard cremation as well, but I'll tell you right now, you divide her remains, I will never speak to you again. Now, did you hear me talk about money? Did you hear me talk about capital gains? Did you hear me talk about anything related to money? What I learned from that funeral director telling that story that day is that those three daughters never spoke again. One had their way, got their plans implemented, never spoke again. They inherited through the laws of intestacy, so there's no will. So that thrust the three sisters into business. The mother was the largest employer in that small town. And because they couldn't talk, the business failed and 100 people lost their jobs. Starting to get a dig for what estate planning is and the magnitude of the damage that is caused by families who can't speak and share and talk about the most obvious and predictable things in lives. It's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed as a Canadian to tell you how poorly we are performing as a culture around this subject. And not to disparage my lawyer friends here, I just had lunch with them. They're great people, they're lovely people, and they are fulfilling a very important role, but they are mopping the floors with families that can't speak. Families, you think divorce is expensive? It's like a dress rehearsal. Sorry, family lawyers everywhere. There's lawyers everywhere. You think divorce is expensive? It's like a dress rehearsal for the really big show, which of course is family litigation over the whole thing. And I think what litigators find out is that when families start fighting over family businesses or cottages or even mom's watch, what they're finding is that it's not like someone really wants it. They just don't want someone else to have it. And they'll burn down the house. There's a notorious family in Hamilton who two brothers spent $50 million in legal fees fighting over a business worth exactly $50 million. They literally burnt down the house. Craziness. But this is what we're left with. When families struggle to start conversations around, especially around the division of hard to divide assets, and I keep coming back to family businesses or cottages because they are the best examples. They're absurd examples where people say, well, our kids will figure it out. They'll just figure it out. I had to figure it out. We're going to repeat. So they'll just figure it out. And vacation homes are great, especially when someone has 4 kids and they have 4 kids. I don't know how you're going to jam. How are you going to jam 20 people into a 2-bedroom vacation home? The most successful families in this country, and there are many that are doing exactly what I'm describing. They are working with advisors like Ken. They are having annual family meetings, and they're getting out in front of it, just like they're getting in front of their investments. They're getting out in front of the transition of their assets, and they're preparing heirs, and they're trying to find out how to do it. And they're reading and learning around the subject that culturally we distance. It's hard work, really hard work. There was a time in this country where the words matriarch and patriarch actually meant something. And they've been concepts that have been kind of relegated to the curb, kicked to the curb. You're old, you're a matriarch or patriarch, you're not really working and making money, so you don't have value. There was a time in this country when an old person spoke, people actually listened. They had wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, and people paid attention. And that has slipped out of our culture. Part of what I'm trying to do is resurrect that and give matriarchs and patriarchs permission to indulge in those leadership roles inside their family. One of the great experiences that I have is actually being a speaker inside family meetings. And one family meeting in particular really stuck with me. It was in Chicago. A Canadian family met in Chicago. Their kids had kind of spread out across the globe, actually. 17 family members in that room that day, 3 generations. Guess who was chairing the meeting that day? It was a 15-year-old girl who knows with great certainty that she will inherit over $1 billion. Now, that family could have gone down the roads of the Vanderbilts and so many other wildly successful families of significance and wrap their wealth in secrecy. Leave it to the reading of the will and then surprise, and then watch it unravel. This family, like so many other Canadian families now, are going down a different road. It pains me as a Canadian to say that the Americans are actually much further ahead than us. They have been relying on advisors to add more value to the relationship, using family meetings to actually bring family members together, to engage them and prepare them for this transition, including making sure that your adult children have wills. You want to give yourself a great gift? Get your children, I can tell you right now, when our kids turned 18, we bought them wills. I should note that they were very disappointed. They were hoping for cars. we didn't go to a lawyer with them. We said, you're a young adult. The law does not say, well, there's a portion of the laws for young adults. 18, you're an adult. You may not have assets, but you have a will that can keep pace with the changes in your life. Your lawyers can show you how to amend wills. It's much easier to change a will and amend a will than start from ground zero. I will never forget the day I was sitting in the Air Canada Lounge at Pearson watching that awful Humboldt bus crash episode unfold on the prairies, and I knew what was happening. I knew what was going to happen. I knew there were some people on that bus over the age of 18. They reported it. And I knew that their parents were going to be arriving at the local hospital inquiring on the well-being of their children. And I knew that they would be bumping into privacy laws because they didn't have healthcare directives. You go in for a will, you come out with 2 bonus documents, a financial power of attorney and a healthcare directive. Business owners, holy smokes. If you're a business owner, you don't have a will. I don't know a business owner who has a financial power of attorney who doesn't have a will. It's the primary document. We go in for the will, we get the financial power of attorney. What's that document? That's about the living. That covers that scenario where the business owner bumps his head, he falls off his tractor. He's unconscious. There's a financial power of attorney empowering someone to continue to write checks and keep that person's financial affairs going until they get better. And lots of people do. We learned this in Technicolor with COVID, with people ending up on ventilators. I mean, it really, if there's one silver lining coming out of that, it really elevated the public discourse around the importance of estate planning. Wills, financial power of attorneys, and healthcare directives. Healthcare directives. How far is the nearest hospital from here? 5 miles? A couple miles? Right now, right this minute, there is a family playing the game that the whole family can play. Actually will play. It's called plug unplug. This is where people like yourself, someone has had a bad day, they're ending up in the hospital, unplanned, and the family is freaking out. Someone's dying. No conversation of will. So you know who they dial? This table right here. They're dialing this table. You guys done bedside wills? Anyone? They are the worst place. You got lawyers popping into the hospital. You got the client popping in and out of consciousness. You got the lawyer trying to catalog the assets and where they should go. You got the kids out in the hallway coming in trying to lobby for the business, lobby for the vacation home. And you got the person who's not in great shape trying to sort all this stuff out. It is awful. It's awful. And we can do better than this. I did some quick math. 3 million people in downtown Vancouver, the immediate area. That's 80% of them. 2.4 million would be over the age of 18. That means there's 1.2 million people within 20-minute drive of here that don't have a will. What is going on? I actually believe, and I know this from personal experience, that when I update my will, that sense of satisfaction, the fact that we go into our family meetings and not just, write our wills, we actually share them. I have a copy of my parents' wills. They're still alive, 88, 84. I have a copy of their will. They have a copy of my will. Nothing says we die in order. I have a copy of our kids' will. They have a copy of my will. We just made our 30 and 28-year-olds co-executors after lots of conversation in our family meetings about the roles and the duties and could they work together, should they work together, do they want to work together? Look, if you're looking for one agenda item at your very first family meeting and you want to come out with a win, it would be, hey kids, we want to work with Ken, our advisors, we want to bring everyone together. We just want to get out in front of this. We just have one thing we want to work on, and that is we need to update our wills. Your mother and I travel together, and we need to update our executor. Have you done that? Have you looked at your will? Do y'all know who your executor is? A lot of people select executors that are older than themselves, and they die. 1968, when Bobby Kennedy took a bullet in Los Angeles, that was a pretty horrific day for most Americans. The good news is he had a will. The bad news is, who do you think his executor was? Exactly. Assassinated 5 years earlier, never updated. Now, I don't know who was advising the Kennedys, but it sure as hell wasn't Ken. Because Ken would never let one of you do that. I mean, this is the difference between a good advisor and an extraordinary advisor. People who are looking at all the different areas of your financial affairs and making sure that you've got things buttoned down. These are huge, huge issues. That predictability. My financial advisor happens to be advising my parents and investing their wealth. That firm invested my grandparents' wealth. That firm is investing our kids' wealth, 4 generations under administration. Now, talk to any advisor, any accountant, any lawyer, the kinds of work that they can do when they've got a big panoramic view, intergenerational view of families is vastly improved. What do we tend to do? Silo. My accountant, my parents' accountant, different, because we can't talk about wealth. These are huge lost opportunities, especially when it comes to the preparation of heirs. The number one concern that people have about family meetings is whether or not they should disclose how much wealth they have and where it's invested and how it's invested. More secrets. And what I often hear back, the pushback I get with my message, and I'm okay with people to disagree with me, it's that if we disclose, then our children will become kind of broken. It'll take the drive and the wind out of their sails. They won't have the ambition. They'll head to the couch and play Xbox. I don't know, there's some version. There's a lot of different versions of that sentiment, that it will somehow take away that authentic drive. And listen, so my pushback on that sentiment is simply this. Okay, so you die tomorrow, what happens? Well, they learn everything. So you're just not here to see it. And part of what I'm talking about is the duty and the responsibility that comes that when we have created wealth through good fortune and hard work and deferred consumption. Those are usually the ways in which we accumulate surplus capital in our lives. We have a duty to prepare the people for what is surely coming their way. And that involves conversations. Conversations that when we try to approach it like a do-it-yourself, build a fence on the weekend by yourself, it's not going to work. This is a subject by having a third party in the room, a trusted advisor, to facilitate those conversations. Do you know the benefits that accrue to the family when we start stripping away all of the assumption making about who gets what? One of the greatest benefits of a family meeting is everyone hears the same thing at the same time. So in the fullness of time, when a parent dies and some sibling says, yeah, no, Dad definitely wanted me to have the boat. And you got 12 other people going, dude, we were all... 11 people heard it the other way in our family meeting. We've gone through all of the different assets. What are you talking about? Or can you imagine a family that meets once a year repetitively for 10 years? And there's agendas and minutes and lots of repetitive conversations. And someone's aggrieved and litigates. Can you imagine family members going to a judge and saying, look, we dealt with this. We dealt with this over and over and over. There was no last minute change to the will. There's nothing impetuous about this estate plan. There was no undue influence to this estate plan. My parents didn't make a capricious change at the very end of their life because of a lack of capacity. We've been having family meetings. This is a consistent approach to the division and transition of assets. Look, here are the minutes. Here's what our family, that's good governance, and it's happening in this city right now. We're just not reading about it. Who wants to read in the local newspaper, a family that meets with their advisor once a year to get in front of this stuff? It's boring stuff. What do? We go home, we watch Crave, we watch Succession, we watch Bloodline on Netflix, go back to the 80s with Dallas and Dynasty. This business of watching wealthy people destroy their relationships and their wealth makes for such cheap entertainment for people who are less fortunate. We always talk about the importance of legacy. And for those of you who have read my first book, where I talk about the importance of the next generation about risking their capital to purchase their parents' business at full market value based on a third-party valuation of the shares. Like a lot of next generations in my audience are like, oh my God, who invited this idiot? All I had to do was just wait for someone to die and I get it for free. But we know the survival rate of those family businesses is 30%. And we know that of that 30%, when they've been gifted, only 3% make it to the third generation. I tell business owners and wealthy people all the time, if you love to gamble, save your airfare. You don't need to go to Vegas. Just hop up, get up in the morning, get dressed, go to your office. You're in the biggest casino of your life. It's called your business. What is your plan? What is your plan to transition these businesses? It is really easy to divide cash at the estate level. I've watched 2 generations of my family as they aged. I saw them sell boats and stuff and art and cottages, stuff that people didn't want to risk and buy. Ask family members if they want to buy your stuff. And you'll really find out how people place value on your assets. I've watched 2 generations move to cash and die, and the administration of those estates are absolutely quick and easy. By the way, we don't leave cash to people we don't love and trust and respect. If there is a kind of a hierarchy of gifts, I would put cash at the very, very top. The very top. Because cash represents flexibility. Other assets like, here's the cottage, don't sell it. Give it to the grandkids and the kids and the grandkids. It's a problem. I promised to talk about generation skipping. Why is it that grandparents, especially when it comes to things like cottages, why are they skipping over their own kids and leaving it to their grandchildren? I mean, why do they get along so well? I have a theory. They have a common enemy. It is very interesting to watch grandparents correct or address what they maybe view in retrospect as maybe deficiencies in their own parenting with their own kids, and they try to solve those problems with cash. And of course, there's no family meetings, there's no conversations. What's happening is kids are, and maybe they get it in trust, but in many cases they're not. They're just getting lump sum amounts at the estate level, and then the fur flies. Much of the lifestyle that is being enjoyed by G2 is got debt attached to it, but people just make assumptions that everything is going great in G2, and so they zip over top and then go to right to G3. There are grandchildren's families in this city where the grandchildren have more money than their parents. That is not a family you want to invite yourself to Thanksgiving dinner. No one should be holding a sharp knife there. It is not. These are not pleasant families to watch. Broken. Irreparably broken because they have struggled to talk about wealth. Let's talk about some of the other issues that you could talk about very briefly in the course of a family meeting. The number 2 thing right behind the selection of an executor is living gifts. We've all watched what's happened to real estate here and in Toronto and other parts of this country. We know that 80% of first-time home buyers are using family money, right? That's estate planning. We keep thinking estate planning is just about dying. There it is, game on. The amount of living gifts that are going to have to transition, are transitioning, is only going to increase. Encouraging the next generation, if we have some older clients here, encouraging your children to work with Ken to learn how to save and invest instead of just consume is going to be absolutely critical. Structuring these living gifts so that there are actual estate equalization records in place. You know what I'm talking about. Grandparents, I'll give this to you. Just don't mention it to your brother. All right? Just here's a loan, here's a gift, no documentation, no proper loan, nothing. Just more secrets and side deals, which always get revealed in the fullness of time. We can do better. In the book, Willing Wisdom, I'm going to wrap up because I want to leave some time for a couple of questions, then we're going to assemble the panel. But I just really want to encourage you to spend a couple of hours and read this book. It is not another technical book on estate planning full of Latin words that intimidates people. This whole subject, I swear, has been designed to push people away from writing wills. We got 127 million Americans who don't have a will. Don't feel bad. It's not like we're the only people on the planet that are messing this up. And listen, half of all lawyers in Vancouver don't even have a will. So really, don't be so hard on yourself. Just take a breath. You're doing okay. But if you do one thing, read the book, call a lawyer, book an appointment. Please do not go to Staples and do a will kit for $20. It is not a race to the bottom. This is not the place to save $1,000. This is a very, very specialized area of the law. It is constantly evolving. And I would even encourage you further that, to select a lawyer that specialize. They're not doing divorces in the morning and then real estate, at 2 in the afternoon and then, corporate reorg at 4. These are people that know that this area of the law is tricky and the stakes are really high. And I don't want to be overly technical, but a good example of that is we just changed my parents' will. They had my brother and I as co-executor of their estate. And my brother lives in Indiana. We were almost about to make their Canadian assets subject to U.S. tax. There is stuff that you have no idea. You don't even know what you don't know. So you need really, really good advice. Let me wrap up and say this. Willing Wisdom will take a couple of hours to read. It's 3 people sitting in a bar in Las Vegas drinking and having food and talking about wills and dying and aging and the role of children and conversations about money. And then one of the characters in the book, the protagonist, his name is William. It's my middle name. I did an awful job of hiding myself in the narrative. He shares 7 questions that his family have used over the years across the generations to begin to prepare the next generation and the parents to find the estate plan that is right for them and to communicate and bring transparency to that conversation. If you read the book, if you actually go one step further, work with Ken, work with a trusted advisor, have a family meeting, I guarantee you that it was definitely worth the flight from Toronto to join you today. Thank you. Thank you. So, how are we doing for time? I want to take a couple of questions, and we want to bring the panel up now.
They can ask you a question. We have 32 minutes.
32 minutes?
We're right back on schedule.
Why don't we assemble the
Sure.
the panel? And while we're doing that, I'll take a couple of questions. And let me just say this: Vancouver is still a big little town, isn't it? I've noticed, a lot of you people know each other. And we're talking about maybe the world's most awkward subject on the planet: aging, family, money. So I would ask that if you have a question, that you preface it with, "I have a friend." Who else is coming?
Got a couple.
Okay. Manager,
Yeah,
Stacy, Michael, Chase, where are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm just 2 boys, girl.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah.
Having
Yeah,
the
yeah,
birthday
yeah.
I see it. Blinded by the light. Kind of feels like we're in the dating game.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Bachelor
All right.
number 1.
Oh,
Number
you
2.
need that. I've got
Hey,
this.
pick the old guy, not the young guy.
All right. I think Ken promised a free extra book to the first courageous soul to offer the first question.
Actually, a copy of your first book.
Oh, and a signed copy could be worth upwards of $26 someday. So
Yeah. It's only sold 1 million copies worldwide, so somebody must have. I knew, Stephen, you'd have a question.
Here. Unfortunately, one of my parents passed away recently, and we recently found out that for whatever reason, I think I know, but we don't know for sure, obviously. The title of the home was not put into, I believe, there's 2 options. One is joint tenancy and the other one is cohabitation. And I think it's under joint tenancy. So can you explain to me, please, if that's the case, the disadvantage of having done that and what some of the potential remedies would be?
May I take this? I have a lot of experience with this. So I used to be in private practice until a couple of years ago, and 27 years. In 27 years, I've seen the problem I want to tell you maybe 5 times. So it doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens to you, that's all that counts. So yes, there's 2 ways to own any asset in a shared way. One is joint tenancy, the other is tenancy in common. So joint tenancies, and I know everybody here knows this, joint tenancy's distinguishing feature is what we call a right of survivorship. So if one joint tenant passes away, the property will go automatically to the surviving joint tenant or joint tenants without having to go through your estate, therefore without being subject to probate fees. Now, if someone dies and the estate falls in and the estate lawyer does a title search, and you've always thought that this property is held in joint tenancy, but now you find, oh no, it wasn't in joint tenancy. Somebody made an administrative mistake. You hired, it doesn't even have to be, some people go, oh, it's the notaries. It doesn't even have to be a notary. It could be even competent lawyers make mistakes. So you look at the title and it could be tenancy in common. The last time this happened, the properties in Vancouver weren't even as expensive as there are now. This house, I'm telling you, was $7 million. At that point, it's probably $15 million now. So the husband passed away. The wife came to my office. We did a title search. The property was held in tenancy in common. So she ended up having to pay an extra $54,000 in probate fees. Some people live on $54,000 a year. And she protested. She's like, no, this should have been registered in joint tenancy. In this case, it was a notary public, but I'm telling you, even competent lawyers can make mistakes. We went back to the notary public. He's like, no, you signed. You saw how this was prepared. That's your signature. So, and she just bit the bullet. Probably legal fees would be equal to whatever she had to pay extra in probate fees. So one thing I used to advise my clients when I was in private practice, and I still continue to advise as an estate planner, I'm an estate planner with National Bank Financial, is the best practice is to review your estate plan every 3 to 5 years. You don't have to change your will every 3 to 5 years. Just put your mind to your estate planning, see if your wishes have changed. But while you're doing the review, ask the same lawyer to get a title search of all the real estate you own and make sure that that mistake hasn't been made. It's very cheap to do a title search. So yes, there is a difference between joint tenancy and tenancy in common, and it's not only different as they're not only different as legal concepts, they can actually make a real difference in actual dollars. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
But I guess what I also want to say is, what happens if you do not change it? If the parent says, I don't want to change out of what it exists now,
Yeah.
what are the implications to the children?
Yeah.
When
So when an owner of an asset doesn't want to do something, you can't make them. So sometimes you have to live with the consequences. But I just picked up on something else that I'd like to also comment on. I think the lawyers would agree with me that it's really not a good idea for children and parents to be joint tenants. You look at the probate fees and you're like, oh, we're saving, tens of thousands of dollars in probate fees, but it can attract so many other problems that if this is a real life scenario and you're thinking of, children getting on the title of real estate owned by parents, I would advise that parent not to do it unless there's a real compelling reason to do it.
We have a question over here, Chase. Thank you, Manager. We have a question here.
Yes, Ken, we did our will when you were with Scotia. So what should we do? Should we go to national now? How does that work?
Well, no, there's a simple answer to that. You did your will when you were at Scotia, but you elected Scotia to be the executor of your will. Now, I'm advising all of the clients to go to Stacy, wherever you are, Stacy, to Heritage Trust. So there's several people in this room. One, their fees are substantially cheaper. The big draw when we were at Scotia was if they're your executors and you hold your assets at Scotia, we're going to give you, a third off the fee. Well, your assets aren't there anymore. We don't have any connection with the people there anymore. And I've spent a lot of time, and I'm looking for an independent firm, that's not bank owned, that's local. I don't want your will done or your executorship to happen in Toronto. I don't want it to happen in Montreal. So I can definitely connect you and Heritage and Stacy together.
Yes, we offer an independent executorship services. So if you are on the fence about who you should appoint as your executor, or if you have an executor that has passed away, like what we heard earlier, then Heritage Trust can be a professional executor that you might consider appointing in your will.
I'm a U.S. citizen as well as Canadian citizen, and do you have someone that's knowledgeable in both areas to go through an estate will?
I think I'll take this one.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody's going to take this one, not me.
So it's a really niche, specialized area of law to be able to navigate both the U.S. estate and tax system and also the Canadian system. There are people that have knowledge on it. Like I have a bit of knowledge on it, but I'm no specialist in it. There are very few specialists who work in that area, and it really just depends on how complicated your situation is. So in the U.S., they have an estate tax for starters, and basically how that works is that you're taxed 40% on your assets when you pass away, your worldwide assets. But there's an exemption of up to 12 million. So your first 12 billion in assets is tax-free, and then you're paying a 40% tax on the rest. So we don't have that in Canada. We don't have death taxes per se. We just have probate fees, which Banajay spoke a little bit about, and we also have a deemed disposition. So in Canada, you've got your capital gains on your assets are all realized when you pass away and become due and payable. So you end up paying tax on all your assets in Canada. They don't do that in the US. It's a different system. And as a result, because there's a discrepancy, the tax planning is really complicated for cross-border work. If your assets are simple, then it's manageable. So you might get away with a relatively simple setup. But if you have a complicated asset structure, then it could be much more complicated, and you might want that specialization from someone in the cross-border field.
Okay, any other questions? There we go. Okay, here we go. Up front, okay. We've got one more question over here too, Chase, after that one.
This question might be more for Ken. You mentioned to us in previous meetings that, or maybe not you per se, but your team talked about providing financial guidance for our children. Now, I'm going to pay you a huge compliment. We were contemplating hiring someone from your company to help guide our children through their financial endeavors once we passed away. Is that service willingness still available?
Yeah, I think
executor. Specifically executor.
Are you talking about financial advice for your children?
Yes, being good as far as being an executor.
Okay, well, I think it bodes well, and that's where you have dad and son combination. All the people in here that have gray hair I can relate to, and Cody being 29 years of age and Chase being soon to be 27. The beauty is that the combination is I work well, and Darcy, you said it well in the video, is that it's multi-generational. So am I going to be able to relate to a 23-year-old, 24-year-old? I have a tough time relating to my 25-year-old daughter sometimes. So just joking, Montana, I love you. However, that's where I think Cody and Chase can come into play. And that's what we're trying to do with all of our clients. If we haven't met your children, we want to meet your children. And there's nothing better than Cody, who's a CFA and a licensed portfolio manager, to take the lead on that, because
maybe you didn't totally understand what I'm asking. It's like not just rely on for financial advice, but actually be hired out as an executor.
Us?
So no, that's
The
where
we-
Heritage comes in.
Yeah, that's heritage comes into
Yes,
play.
I think that's
Yeah.
where we come in.
Stephen, that's
Yeah.
where Heritage
Okay,
would come
but they
into
would
play.
they would be working with you in as well.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Well, the easiest thing is if all parties know one another, like if I know Michael, I know Stacy, and we had Manage put together the estate before it goes to Michael, and we're working as a cohesive unit, we all do a more effective job. And at the end of the day, if we're all working together, what do you achieve? You save money, and you've got everybody on the same page.
Yeah, so Stephen, we can't legally be the executor. That's where Heritage Trust comes in. All that we're designed to do is essentially be the quarterback of everything.
Okay.
Bringing those professionals together to help you for whatever hypothetical need that may be. Okay.
Okay, that's understood. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Chase, Kirsten up here has a question.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I have a friend whose parents are turning 75. Was there some words of advice on how to bring this subject up with parents that really don't want to talk about it, and potentially siblings as well?
I think it's a really practical, it's a great question. I think one of the most practical and easiest way of starting those family conversations would be for you or your friend to get their own will completed and share it with their parents. I have two acquaintances that died, couples at the same time. One in an interior BC plane crash, single engine plane crash. The other one T-boned in an intersection. We don't necessarily die in order. What I've found is when the next G2 takes their will to their parents and says, look, I'm traveling. Travel's often a good moment where we're updating our will, we're thinking. You should have a copy of my will. Many parents will then reciprocate. There's reciprocity. And it will start. It's a little weird that children are parenting their parents on this subject, but it's a great way to start.
How about taking them to a estate planning seminar, just so that someone else can take them and talk to them about the issue?
When I do events like this, and I've got daughters and mothers and fathers, any combination of like multiple generations in the same room, it's fantastic. It's the silence that's destroying families. It's not family conversations about wealth. It's the silence that's grinding on the relationships about how it's going to go down.
I've got a follow-up question to that, Tom, for you. I'm not opposed to transparency amongst families. I think it's a really good idea. What kind of advice would you have for families that are a bit less functional, a family that has a bit more dysfunction to them, if the siblings don't get along well? How would you navigate that one?
It's a fair question, and actually a really good question, because look, not every family is a version of a Norman Rockwell painting where everyone is just fabulous, right? Families are complex. There's addiction and marital breakdowns and all sorts of stuff going on in the modern family. Let's just be honest. So, and we have children that are marrying people that maybe have different values and approach to wealth and spending habits that are out of alignment with. So here's a little shortcut for, Ken knows this. Here's a little shortcut. We don't use trusts in this country nearly as aggressively as Americans do. But if you're one, and it's complex, it's the most complex area of estate planning, trusts. Here's a shortcut. If you have a family situation, a scenario, or a dynamic where there's something going on and there is a lack of trust around how someone will deal with your wealth, there's probably a good case for the use of a trust. We often call things that they're not. They should be called lack of trust.
Okay, Chase, there we go. Back.
I have a friend who is considering whole life insurance to reduce the burden on the next generation. What do you guys think about that?
Well, buying a life insurance policy is a good way to fund your estate if there's going to be a large capital gains tax. That's That's how it's usually used. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So if sometimes people buy life insurance because they have minor children. They're thinking, until my child is 19, I want to make sure they're safe and well if I pass away. But then another use of life insurance is if you have assets that gain a lot over the years and you're looking at a large capital gains tax, then you can buy a whole life insurance to fund your estate.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not an insurance expert. I just took this because I work for the bank.
Ken and I are insurance experts. I would say that each situation is completely different and needs its own assessment. So that becomes an opportunity where if you'd like to connect afterwards, I think sitting down and understanding the dynamics that face you personally and your family is where you can really get into solutions that can be customized to your circumstance. Okay.
This is not so much a question, but a comment, because my two children have investments with Ken independently of mine. And Melanie she's okay, but Jack, he does not care. He doesn't care. He just knows there's money there, and he doesn't care if there is or isn't. But the boys talk to Jack on a level that he can understand it. And he always feels better when he's talked to you, independent of me saying, Jack, you got to learn how to do this. But he always feels better about that. So I thank you for that, because what's a mother? She doesn't know anything.
Thank you for that.
The big thing for us, really, I think it's just something that's not necessarily talked about, is with a generational wealth transfer, there's a lot of learning involved, right? And for children going through high school, you're taught jack squat about how to manage your finances, what's a mortgage, investments, all of that. And it's really daunting for a lot of children out there. And so for us, a big aspect is being multi-generational family business, dealing with multi-generational families, is one of our first steps is always looking at that Gen 3, as Tom was talking about, and just starting with the fundamentals, right? It's starting from those fundamentals where they gain the confidence, they have the knowledge, and then through that, they can kind of delve further and have the larger conversations about wills and stuff like that. And so from that learning base, establishing that is pretty big for us. And we would recommend that if anybody, we met a lot of your children already, but if you're on the cusp of making an introduction, please reach out to myself. I'd be more than happy to talk to them.
Okay. I have a question for Stacy. Stacy, I was appointed the executor on my mom's estate. Oh, wait a sec. I had a friend that was appointed. Sorry. And she didn't want to do it, right? And she didn't have the time. She didn't have the expertise. And she was really, really stressed, but knew there was she felt obligated. Was there any resource for her that she would be able to, that would help her with that?
Absolutely. So, being an executor is a difficult job. It's time consuming and can be very complicated. You are not compelled to act unless you have intermeddled in the estate. So anyone that is appointed as an executor of an estate in a will has the opportunity to renounce that executorship. And in that case, if there is an alternate executor appointed, then that executor can step up and do it. So if you're unwilling or unable to act as the executor, you don't have to, unless, again, you've intermeddled in the estate. So if at the beginning of the administration you decide that it's not the right job for you, there's a lot of liability that can come out of it, or responsibilities and fiduciary duties that are intertwined with being an executor. So it is a large responsibility. And yes, you can renounce the executorship if there's an alternate, that alternate can step up. And if there's no one else, someone can step up and be an administrator, or you can appoint someone like Heritage Trust to do the executorship for you, as we would be your agent in that. So there's a lot of different options. Yeah, you don't have to do it. Your friend doesn't have to do it.
Okay, we're going to take one more question, and Ben, you have the stage, because I want to leave time for Tom, who has to leave at 3 or shortly after to sign everyone's books. So we'll take one more question. If there's any other questions, email us, and then we'll ask the appropriate panel guest, and we'll get back in touch with you. No,
I'm good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not used to not speaking. So I'm going to out my family. I'm here with my parents. This is Betty Ann and Trevor. I invited them here because of the presentation I saw with Tom a while ago. And so I want to be relatable to the rest of the group here. So I'm a finance professional, more than 20 years. I don't know the answers to any of these things. And so it's a reality that hopefully most of us share, so that we don't feel intimidated about starting the process. But the question I had is actually related to the life insurance question, is that we talk about kind of known costs. We know that we have a cottage as a family, and there's gonna be some capital gains tax there. But I still feel like I'm going at it blind. What sort of expenses or just common unknowns are there in this process? Should these lovely people here pass pretty quickly here? I don't know. So outside of the capital gains stuff, like what else? Like what are we all missing that it happens all the time that are just some easy tips for us?
I think number one at the top of that list would be just a real expectation of how long it takes the executor to administer an estate. I would be shocked if Ken has not received phone calls from the children of a client who's died. And the kids are like, hey, Ken, so we're just wondering, like this is days or weeks after. Like it's a slow process. So part of what we tackle in our family meetings is like we remind people just how long it takes, even for simple estates, to be administered. Which is why in our estate plans, we actually have created structures so that there's an immediate release of cash, which to everyone, a first tranche of cash, which just buys the administrator, the estate, the executor, just time and room to go off and file terminal tax returns and wind up Rogers' phone bill. That will take 7 to 8 years to wrap up a phone bill with Rogers. I don't know if you know that. Sorry, is Ted Rogers' family, any family members? It's just managing expectations and just getting people to understand that the job of an executor is difficult. It's not bestowing some special status or special love on that child to be that, to execute that duty. In fact, anyone here who has been an executor will probably now be convinced that their parents love them the least. Like it is, it is not easy.
And I can definitely say that over the years we've had, when the executor of the state is the children, which is very discomforting for Cody and I, and we always talk about it, is we get calls from the children and the parents are still alive. And it's like,
whoops.
Okay, yes, your father has cancer. Yes, it's terminal, but he's still on the earth plane. Do you think you could do some grieving before you come to us just to figure out how you're going to access the money? So there isn't too many things that we haven't seen. So,
yeah.
Okay, I think, go ahead.
I was just going to add, because I think maybe you're wondering about what the actual other costs would be. Is that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Like, again, the easy one is the capital gains on a cottage, but beyond that, what are we all missing that most executors get surprised with?
Right. I mean, I can list some. We got probate fees, so that's a 1.4% tax on the assets that form part of the estate. You've got executor fees, so depending on who your executor is, they may charge a fee for doing it. In BC, if the will is silent, then in BC, the maximum they can claim is 5% of the value of your estate. And then there's an annual fee that they're entitled to as well, which is 0.4%. If it's not silent, so if it's expressed what the fee is, then it will be whatever is expressed. You've got legal fees. So if there's probate, there's probably going to be a lawyer involved to deal with the probate application and helping the executor through the administration process. There'll be accounting fees. You'll have an accountant deal with all the tax filings. Those are the normal ones. So.
Thank you.
Okay, well, on behalf of Verus, all of our sponsors, Tom Deans, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank all of you for coming out. Thank you. Tom and I are going to scoot up to the front right now. He's going to sign your books. Don't forget about the wine tasting and desserts over there. So please help yourself. And once again, thank you so very much for coming out.